Salem witch trials, or the witch trials in general, there were secret societies of feminist witches.
If marriage is a form of violence against women, I guess abortion is healthcare.
Go to a feminist protest, you'll notice that they don't wear a lot of clothing. They're either half naked or they've got their bits out. Feminism, it has just taken the ideology that Christianity has set up and has distorted it. In fact, in itself is a system of oppression because it goes against and tears down the image of God.
The spiritual warfare in the culture war is a real thing. We just had it so many times to film this episode today. Insane. More to that. It's clear that the enemy loves feminism. That's right. Feminism is satanic. When you think of feminism, what do you think of? Have you heard the saying true feminism is pro-life, or real feminism protects little girls? Well, Noleen and Sedra, wife of my good friend Andrew Sedra, who's been on the show, they are a powerhouse couple who are literally tearing down the high places. Remember the Salem witch trials? Remember the story of Frankenstein? These historical moments that bolstered the feminist movement are a lie. Noleen and I expose the ancient stories that birthed the most destructive ideology our world has ever seen. It's all connected. Get ready for a very illuminating and elucidating conversation. Give us a rating and review. Let us know what you think. I love reading them. It's so helpful. Send in your questions too. Put a review. Go to iTunes, Spotify, hit 5 stars, write in a review. It shoves the show up the charts. We've been climbing the charts a lot. Tons of people from all around the country walking up to me saying they're listening to the show, saying guests of theirs that they love. You guys are really helping us reach a new generation to embolden, educate, and inspire them to get active in fighting the culture wars, which is the war for the family and the children and the babies in the next generation. So follow us on Rumble, because you guys know YouTube has come after the show before. So Rumble is where free speech lives. Help us protect the show in case it ever gets axed from YouTube. And join us at the White Rose Resistance in making the local church great again, to get them activated, doing the work that they should have been doing all along, rather than waiting for the fighters or the 501c3 organizations to do the work that the local church is called to do. That's actually the solution to everything. So if you care about that, the films we're making to mobilize the local church, inspire them, curriculum, education, the show, media, activism, apologetics, training, activating our donors and local churches, support us. We need your help. Go to thewhiterose.life, thewhiterose.life. And join us as an ally at $35 a month. You get your battle box in the mail. Join us. Log in on the White Rose app when you become a $35 a month donor. And there is a slew of epic stuff there and community with like-minded fighters. Or join at $70 a month. That's air support. And join our books in the Barracks Book Club. We just finished reading The God of Sex, how spirituality shapes sexuality, something like that. It's a powerful book on how this is so theological. And we hang out and talk about books live on Zoom with yours truly and supporters all around the country. You can support us more if you'd like as well. We really appreciate it. Buckle up. Let's get into it. This is the Seth Gruber Show. Noleen, welcome to the show. Finally.
I know. Goodness. Thanks for having me. We've been trying to do this for months, it feels.
I know.
So I'm on it.
Yeah. So, I mean, your hubby's been on a couple times. For everyone listening, okay, this is going to be spicy, okay? I don't know if you're ready. I got a gift here. I don't know if anyone's noticed this from my friends the Sedras. Those are kangaroo testicles right there. And that was a gift from my Aussie friends, people that my wife and I spend more time with than almost any other couple in the country. And these folks live in Sydney. That's what warriors they are, even for life, liberty, and the last stand in America. So just want everyone to know how amazing Noleen and her husband is. But Noleen, I heard something the other day, and this is why I wanted to have you on. Because you're a prophetic voice, you're bold, but you actually know your stuff. and we were at the March for Life, actually, I think with you guys, and I heard these people going like, this, what is it? They said like, this is what a pro-life feminist looks like. And they kept chanting that, and I was like marching behind them. They were like, "This is what a pro-life feminist looks like," and I was thinking, I don't think.
Yeah, no. Here's the thing. So this is where I want to reiterate. I am so grateful for every single pro-life voice that exists, grateful for their message, what they say, but I do have a fundamental disagreement. I've noticed a lot of them will use phrases like, true feminism is fighting for women in the womb or fighting for females in the womb. And the idea that feminism actually fights for life, I fundamentally disagree because the history completely disagrees with you. I think that there is no form of feminism, there's no era in which feminism has existed that actually advocated for rights the way that God defines it. I think in every sense it's demonic. And so I'm happy to dive into it.
Whoa.
We can bring the receipts. It's a bit of a controversial one, but I mean, I think that there's enough evidence biblically and historically to be able to make that claim.
But come on, Noleen, that wasn't very kind because feminism is all about the rights of women. That's what I was told. And so if you're all about the rights of women, then you're about women's right to life. And shouldn't we celebrate and welcome the pro-life feminist crowd into the movement? So I heard you kind of talk about this, and I was like, I got to get Noleen on the show because that's a lot of depth, and I wanted people to be blessed by it. If you were Professor Sedra, and you were, which you kind of are, and you were like helping a class of young fired up believers on this topic, where would we start? Like, how would we begin to make sense of this puzzle piece? Because there's like people talking about first wave, second wave, third wave, and then they're like, no, I met people at my Christian college who were like, smash the patriarchy, I'm a Christian feminist. Help us out, Noleen.
Yeah. So, I mean, I do make this claim quite often, like you can't be a Christian and be a feminist in any capacity. The earliest you could go back to, and I'm talking like I'm a Christian. I'm a big believer that the Bible is the absolute source of truth. So I actually, in my research, found that the very first place that you can find feminism in any degree is in Genesis, the book of Genesis. Genesis chapter 3, the fall of mankind is what we understand it to be. But what I do find very interesting, and I'm sure there have been a lot of people that have kind of dissected this and exegeted this to help us understand what happened here. You have two examples. You have the example of a woman in disobedience choosing to step out of her authority of submission to her husband and overstepping his authority and entertaining this conversation with the serpent, which leads her to being deceived and leads, the fall of humanity. But what you also see is you see the fine print that Adam, who was with her, also took a bite and he ate. So you also have this combination of a woman stepping outside of her authority and her role of submission that God had ordained in the garden in a perfect world. And then you also have man refusing to step up and lead his wife, lead the household the way that God had also ordained. So you have this perfect example of the very first time you see a woman step out of her biblical boundaries and choosing to lead while the man refused to step up. I think that that's really the heart of feminism. It's pushing men down in their role of leadership, and it's allowing women the authority to step up over them. And it's where you see this battle of the sexes start to take place, this division in the household, which ultimately leads to the birth of sin. So that is the perfect starting point. From a historical point of view, the first thing people will say to me, the last time I spoke about this, I had someone in our church who's fairly conservative came up to me, and I mean, we don't really have any non-conservatives in our church, I will be honest in saying that. But he came up to me and he said, I was talking to my mother about feminism, who she leans a little bit more progressive as a Christian. And she told me that, the first wave feminists, all they wanted was equality. They wanted the right to education. They wanted a right to vote. All of this seemingly good things, seemingly acts of equality, if you will. But then I dove into the rabbit hole quite a little bit, and I told him, kind of similar to the statement you made in the beginning, very sarcastically, like, What isn't it like, feminism that gave women the right to be able to speak the way that you're speaking now? I get that all the time. Like, babes, don't you know that it's feminism that allowed you to post on social media and gave you room to speak? And I'm like, no, actually, that's Christianity. Christianity is actually the fundamental framework and ideology that allowed the rights for women in general and the validation that women are valuable to any capacity. So there is that side note. But the first way feminists are very interesting, because the biggest ones you'll hear of, and I'm sure you can jump in, you know all about this too, Seth. Mary Wollstonecraft, she's the mother of feminism. She wrote The Vindication for the Rights of Women. She is a woman that people see as a feminist icon. I'm literally in New York City at the moment, and we were walking through the New York Public Library, and they have a huge painting of her up, talking about her as a feminist icon. But what many people don't know, and this is kind of the heart of feminism, is feminism was birthed, these ideas were birthed out of a very demonic worldview. Her husband, William Godwin, which if nobody has heard of him, you don't need to look very far historically, do a quick Google search, you'll find that this man had radical political views. And by radical, I don't mean radical right in the way we understand it. I mean radical in the time that it was, that in a time where Christianity was the norm and it was supreme in many cases, it was just cultural Christianity was normal, there were very few people that tried to have some sort of revolution against the cultural norm, which was a revolution against Christianity. So William Godwin was, before Satanism existed as an organized religion, William Godwin was a so-called Satanist. He idolized the figure of Satan, believing that the story of Genesis 3 that the church has been teaching us is actually all wrong. It's been interpreted wrong fundamentally. And so we need to reinterpret this story. And so they saw this group known as the Romantics. They were just a bunch of poets and romantics at the time, hated Christianity, hated capitalism, hated the system that the church had set up. They sought to pull apart and dissect the Bible and the meaning that the church was teaching of what the Bible actually meant. So Genesis 3, God is actually not the hero. God is actually not the all-powerful good God. God is actually a tyrant. And Satan, this liberator, comes and he, out of the goodness of his heart, tried to liberate Adam and Eve out of the tyranny of the patriarchal system that God had set with Adam as priest of the garden. So these men, most people think, feminism started with one woman having an idea. What they don't know is that behind Mary Wollstonecraft was the propaganda of her husband, who was a socialist, anarchist, Satanist, God-hating man. And so this is the origins of feminism, comes from an ideology of free love, destroying the tradition that the church had established, pulling apart and devaluing the meanings of the Bible, what the Bible's actually trying to say. So that is just first wave feminism, and it all kind of goes downhill from there.
So for people who listening, who are new to the kind of feminist conversation, the rights of women, kind of where does this movement come from? What did their propagators believe? What motivated them? This might sound a little bit shocking to you. Maybe you're like, wow, this Noleen chick's kind of crazy. But like, I someone who's sort of researched this a little bit, I can tell you that Noleen is actually speaking, if not truthfully, not truthfully enough. I took a note here just to be prepared for you and all your wisdom and knowledge, Noleen. But William Godwin, again, the husband of Mary Wollstonecraft, who's called the first feminist, I think they call her. He had discussed John Milton's Satan as an embodiment of precisely the anarchist values that he himself propagated. The rebellion against God turns into a reflection of his own hatred of illegitimate authority and inherited power. Shelley talked about his fascination with Satan, not as the villain for tempting Eve, but an opportunity for Eve.
Yes.
Is this a theme across most of the feminist leaders and movements, is a sort of fascination and obsession with the satanic?
Absolutely. It's so interesting that you can see the work you're referring to, John Milton's Paradise Lost. It's a fascinating depiction of the garden story, because remember, this was a time where everybody was Christian. And if you weren't Christian, you had grown up Christian and you had started to question everything that the world was teaching you. The world, being the church and tradition of the church, cultural Christianity. And so these men, it's very similar to today's progressives. They're all creatives that want to express themselves. So that's why they have blue hair and piercings everywhere and tattoos. And, they're creatives that are trying to express their creativity. More often than not, it's these kind of people. So these are just our version of progressives back in the day in the 18th century. So it's very interesting, though, the adaptation of Satan in John Milton's Paradise Lost. Most people that had this view of socialism, anarchism, honestly, all the isms. Atheism comes from these ideas too. The Enlightenment was basically a movement where we should put the Bible on trial. It kind of started, if you want to backtrack to like the age of exploration, they started to explore beyond what the Bible had as boundaries for the ends of the earth. You see this idea in the Bible of go to the ends of the earth, what they understood as, the Mediterranean or like the ancient world in their view. They hadn't really explored beyond that. So all of a sudden, the age of exploration happens and these men start going beyond the borders that the Bible had described as the end of the earth. So with their small-minded way of thinking, they conclude, the Bible is not absolutely true because the facts say something beyond what is in the Bible. And so that's just like bad exegesis and just not using your brain. But these men genuinely had the foundation of maybe the Bible is not true. And so all of these kind of ideas that came from, socialism came from this idea, from the Enlightenment idea, postmodernism, that truth is subjective. It was all this idea that maybe God is wrong, maybe the Bible isn't accurate, and maybe we just need to look a little bit beyond that. So that's why when most people will still celebrate International Women's Day. I personally make it a choice every single year on International Women's Day to make a video about how it's a socialist organized day. Like I call it National Socialist Day because I'm like, it was created by the socialists. This idea of women empowerment all throughout history that you can see in these organized systems and structures. Anytime it's outside of the church, it's most likely going to be infused with socialist propaganda. So everywhere that you can see this stuff, it's just the same core problem is the Bible might be wrong. So we need to reinterpret how we've done everything according to what scripture says.
Well, Noleen, even prior to the Enlightenment, which, by the way, your description of let's put the Bible on trial is a great way to describe the Enlightenment. Chesterton would have described it as beginning at the wrong end, reason in the void.
Yeah. So
rationality detached from first principles. From a starting point. But even prior to the Enlightenment, Voltaire, who was very influential on like Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Voltaire was famous for talking about, quote, destroying the infamous one. His whole goal was to destroy the infamous one.
Yeah.
That's Christ. He had an absolute antipathy for Christianity. Yeah. So just to bolster your argument, it's fascinating, huh? This seems to be a common theme.
And you see, it's like the Bible has addressed all of this in like, you don't have to read very far, than the first 3 pages or 3 chapters of the Bible. What Satan did when he came to deceive the woman is he said, did God really say? And every idea that you can see that comes up against scripture is this same spirit, a questioning spirit of the inerrancy of scripture, the inerrancy of the word of God, the authority of the word of God. And so all of these ideas, it is so easy for Christians to get deceived because of the toxic empathy stuff. These ideas seem good. Satan seemed like he was trying to help. He's like, you can be like God. What do you mean? This is going to be good for you. And it says when Eve saw, it was pleasing to the eye and good for food, she took some and ate of it. I don't think it's a coincidence that scripture gives us a very specific way that Eve saw it and perceived. She didn't see it as something that was evil. She didn't see it as something that was going to take her away from God in disobedience. She saw that it was something that was good to the eye and would be pleasing to her. So it's very sneaky the way that the enemy packages all these ideologies when at the heart of it, it's just putting the word of God on trial. Did God really say?
There's an author I've been enjoying recently, Noleen. Her name's Carrie Gress. Mm-hmm. And what do you think about this? She said, the Romantics knew that in order to reshape culture, one had to go back to the beginning of culture and rewrite it.
Same thing they're doing now. I'm telling you, it's the same progressives now. They have the same way of thinking as these romantics back then. It's just, I think every era has a group of progressives that are trying to deconstruct the Bible. And I just look at the progressive churches of today, and what you'll find a lot of the time, I get a lot of them on my algorithm. Like, my algorithm is pushing them in my face. I think it's just ridiculous. You can see these, it's mostly women, I'll be honest. Women that have studied, they have a bachelor in theology or a master's in seminary or something like that. And they'll use that as a way of giving their argument credibility. Like, I studied 4 years in seminary theology and this, and I know Greek and I know this, and I have concluded that everything that we've been told is wrong. And I'm like, you knowing and understanding that, you reading it like a textbook does not make you right. And so it's very interesting to me that all of these intellectuals and progressives are the same people, almost like it's the same spirit deceiving people that it was back then in the era of the Romantics.
It's time to stop sitting on the sidelines. No more bench warming. Join us. This American revival we're experiencing needs your unapologetic voice, okay? Revivals are made of people, and you can participate in what Jesus is doing in the culture right now, okay? Stick your staff in the ground, draw your swords, mark your calendar to join our second annual Life or Death conference, right? Life or Death Con in Washington, D.C. on January 22nd, 2026. January 22nd. It's a one-day event to change, awaken, equip, and send out believers who are ready to make a real difference in the culture, like Charlie did. For too long, the churches watch from a distance while the battle rages over there. But the tide is turning. You experience this, like the Spirit's moving. And your voice, your courage, and your leadership is what is essential to what's coming next in our republic. We're bringing out the boldest Christian voices and leaders to lead you in the culture war with wisdom and clarity. Like, Steve Dace, come on, Megan Basham, Abby Johnson, Dr. George Grant, AJ Hurley, and more. Then the very next day, march shoulder to shoulder with us and the White Rose Resistance troops at the March for Life in Washington, D.C. on January 23rd. Okay, so get your tickets at lifeordeathcon.com. Get your ticket for Life or Death Con by going to lifeordeathcon.com and use code Seth, S-E-T-H, my first name, for 20% off your ticket. 20% off, pretty good if you're a listener to the show. See you in Washington, D.C. on January 22nd, 2026, Life or Death Con. You're making me think of this insane experience I had, Noleen, when I was at Westmont, my fake Christian alma mater in Santa Barbara, literally down the street from Oprah's house. And I'm pretty sure the spirit of Oprah had more dominance and influence on my alma mater than the Trinity. But I was sitting down with this lesbian. That's an interest. I never thought I'd start a sentence like that about my alma mater. And because you're not expelled from this Christian college for being a lesbian. I guess you can be expelled if you have sex. But anyway, so this lesbian, quote unquote Christian, who didn't like the articles I was writing in the student newspaper. And she sits down with me, and it's a very short story. And then I'm really curious what you'll say to this. So she goes, why are you saying the things you're saying about my community? It's not nice. And I said, well, what does the Word of God say? And so I read a few passages and verses that would be common to all the listeners, just about prohibitions against sexual immorality writ large. But those obviously encompass sodomy, same sex, and all this stuff. And you know what she said to me? She said, Noleen, she said, what translation version is that?
Yeah.
And then she pulls out hers, and it's one of this like All Saints church that's and it's a new translation they've made.
Yeah, I mean it's the same. Like, what is the word homophobia wasn't created until this, or whatever? Oh, not homophobia. What is it? Same sex relations. What? What's the argument? They like made a whole documentary about it. It's the same thing. It's like, well, the word homosexual didn't exist until this time. So the Bible wasn't talking about this. And I'm like, okay, we just need to use some common sense. Male lying with male. We have made the word now more recently in the English language, but like the translation does not change the argument. Like it's just a very interesting thing to me. And a lot of these people, they try to sound so intellectual by pulling out the different translations and the Greek and the Hebrew and all that. And I'm like, let's exegete, but let's do it properly. Let's use some textual criticism. And the biggest thing is if your idea lies outside of the boundaries of Christendom and orthodoxy, you're probably wrong. But I mean, people just, they do it their own way these days. So,
Noleen, I was with you and your husband, Andrew, at Charlie's memorial. And do you remember Stephen Miller, the like White House deputy chief of staff or something? His like soulless presentation, which was actually kind of cool if you understand its context. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It made me think of this. And so in regards to feminism and these movements, I want to ask you something. He talked about they, and I think he just meant the radical left, the LGBTQ, LMNOP, feminazi, trans the kids, murder Trump movement. And he said, what did he say? He said, you are nothing. You have nothing. You are wickedness, you are jealousy, you are envy, you are hatred, you are nothing. You can build nothing. You can produce nothing. You can create nothing. We are the ones who build. We are the ones who create. And I was thinking about that because to me, that seems like a great description of the modern progressive project and of maybe feminism in general, is that they only exist because they're tearing down something that already was created.
Oh, exactly.
Can you talk about that? What do you think about that?
So we talk about this all the time. My husband says it. I say it. We talk about this all the time. Is leftism or progressivism, these ideas, this ideology, they don't build, they just infiltrate and destroy. So they can't actually build anything. It's just like, you know, the Tower of Babylon, this idea of Babylon as a counterfeit kingdom. It can't actually come up with an autonomous idea. It just has to mimic what God has created and just destroy it. It has to flip it on its head, turns it upside down, makes it mean the opposite of what God has intended it to mean. It's just a redirection and an infiltration of what God has built. So what I kind of already mentioned, this is in Dominion, the book Dominion as well, where Tom Holland kind of pulls apart of this idea of like the Handmaid's Tale and all these women who are in protest of conservatism saying, oh, we're living in the Handmaid's Tale, women's rights are being taken away from them. And what his argument is, he says it's so funny because all of this, all the rights that you currently do have that you claim is because of feminism is actually because of Christianity. Like if you do your research, just do some basic history research, every single civilization before Christianity existed, besides obviously the Jewish people having the Torah, the Hebrew Bible as a basis, which is the same thing as our New Testament Bible says as well. But these ideologies that were external from Christianity, besides from Christianity, were fundamentally oppressive against women and children. So if you use the Romans as one example, this is the most basic one that we know, the Roman Empire, one of the most successful empires in history, the biggest, the greatest. This empire quite literally believed in survival of the fittest, you know, men come out on top because biologically men are stronger. And so for a group of people to understand the value of human beings just in how well you can do in defending yourself, how much you can survive, this shows quite easily that women are not going to make it out on top. A man is stronger than a woman. A man is stronger than a child. And so children are often used as sex slaves or just any kind of slave. Women were used as sex slaves. A Roman male could go out onto the street, rape any woman that he wanted because he was stronger than them, had no obligation to marry them, had no obligation to take care of her child if he got her pregnant. And then somehow these feminists are claiming that Christianity came in as a system made to oppress women when it was Christianity that flipped all of this on its head. Paul talks about in Galatians 3. There's no Jew or Gentile, slave or free, male or female. What Paul is doing is he is packaging the whole story of the gospel and the context to the value of human life, the Imago Dei, saying it doesn't matter who you are, what gender you are, what size you are, what race you are, you have value because you are made in the image of God. And so Paul comes and in a revolutionary way changes the way that human beings see human beings. All of a sudden, men now, if you want a woman, you need to marry this woman and commit to her, only sleep with her in the context of marriage. And now Paul says in Ephesians 5, you now have to lay your life down for this woman. You have to die for this woman. What women do is they come under the headship and the protection and the provision of a male, and the male has a responsibility to protect, provide, and possibly, if it comes to it, die for this woman. In what world is this oppressive to women? I remember seeing a video quite recently of a woman talking about how women changing their last names to their fiance and their new husbands is oppressive and it's a form of patriarchy and women should not do it. I'm like, do you understand the symbolism of that? Is when I took my husband's last name, I made a public statement that now my identity as a woman, as a wife, is coming under the covering of the headship of my husband. When my husband stood at that altar and said yes to me, he said yes to being a covering of protection, to providing for me, to taking care of me. If it costs him his life, he will say yes anyway. All I said yes to was that I would serve and submit to his protection. There's no comparison here. And I think that it is so interesting how feminism has, like you said, has not built any kind of ideology. It has just taken the ideology that Christianity has set up from scripture and has distorted it, has pointed the finger at it to say that it is oppressive, when feminism, in fact, in itself is a system of oppression because it fundamentally goes against and tears down the image of God. I rambled, I'm sorry.
Go check out Echo Church in Sydney, Australia, or follow Noleen if you want more of that. Holy moly, that's more biblical clarity on feminism than I've gotten from most pulpits in America. Noleen, my friend Dr. Nancy Pearcey quotes one of the early feminists who acknowledged Christianity's net positive impact on the culture and referred to Christianity as a strategic women's movement.
I like it.
Isn't that interesting? Which is sort of what you're saying.
Yeah.
And wow, I did not think I was going to get such a bold and beautiful answer to the question of they can't create anything, but that's exactly what I was looking for. I hope you guys caught the depth from which Noleen was speaking. Where does this go from here then? So if and I did one episode on this, but it's been a while and we have a lot of new listeners and conversations are easier to listen to for people. After Mary Wollstonecraft and her husband William Godwin, if she's called the first feminist, and New York City has full-blown paintings of her lauding her as the first feminist, I'm interested in the origins of things, as should you be, listener, by the way, because ideas have consequences and bad ideas have victims, and ideas don't just pop out of the ground like mushrooms. They actually come from somewhere, and they come from people, and they come from context, and they come from movements. Where does it go from here? I've heard you talk about, I've touched on Percy Shelley as well, but if you were to continue going professorial on us and kind of helping the church connect it, where does it go from here?
Yeah, so Wollstonecraft, she has a daughter that we know as Mary Shelley. Mary Wollstonecraft, until she was married to a man named Percy Shelley, who also, by the way, in the same way that William Godwin was, he was an anarchist, socialist, Satanist, followed and adapted the same radical ideas that Satan is a liberator against the tyranny of God. So following the same ideology, the same, intellectual pattern, if you will, these people were, and this is the very interesting thing about feminism, I don't know if you'll notice, is if you look at feminists, just like go to a feminist protest, like some sort of women's rights protest, you'll notice that they don't wear a lot of clothing. Like you'll notice that they're either half naked or they've got their bits out like in protest for feminism. There's a lot of promiscuity. There's a lot of, free sex, free love, all this kind of stuff. The idea of sexual perversion is very much tied in to the feminist movement. And I know you have a lot of info on this too, with Percy Shelley, Mary Shelley breaking up a marriage. And this was quite big in, the time of the French Revolution and the time of these French revolutionaries of just protesting against the sexual norms of Christendom. And so these people did not just have ideas that were anti-capitalist, when it comes to the economy and politics. It was very much seeped into the everyday life and the sexuality, how you do family. All these ideas were not, and this is just what Christians, this is my call to Christians. A lot of people will tell me, why do you guys talk so much about the cultural issues? Can't you just stick to the biblical stuff? And what I say to them is, okay, what cultural issues am I talking about that's not biblical? And they can't come up with any until you say it out loud and then you try to pull apart the idea. I'm like, these feminists, number one, okay, we can move over the right to education thing, which if you really want to get to the foundation of it, it was they wanted independence from their husband just in case I wanted to leave my husband or wanted to split for them. I wanted independence in my own, which is also not a biblical concept, right? The men and women depend on each other. That's the beauty of marriage and the oneness in marriage, but that's a whole separate rabbit hole we can go down. But let's just move beyond that. Let's just say the ideas of women having equality in terms of the right to education. There was also this idea of the reason they wanted to work, and this is where abortion comes from, by the way. The foundational idea of abortion in the Western world is not just, oh, I want to kill my baby. It actually first came from, I don't want to have children. And so the idea of birth control, because children are a hindrance to my career and my independence from my husband. And so Mary Wollstonecraft kind of started this idea of, we want the right to education. And then Mary Shelley kind of learning from, she didn't even really get taught by her mother. She got taught by her father because her mother had died just after childbirth. But she was literally indoctrinated with the same ideas that her mother was because of her father, William Godwin. And so her husband following the same kind of ideologies, Mary Shelley kind of skyrocketed these ideas of motherhood almost being like a burden. Because if I want independence from my husband and if I want to somehow make it and go to work and do all of this, the Industrial Revolution changed the game for feminism. Women were now having opportunities to go into work. There was more work available. There was ways that they were able to work. The Industrial Revolution shifted everything because now women wanted the same opportunities as men, but they wanted to have children at the same time, which didn't actually work. So what they would say was, in the same way, they just decided to protest their bodies. In the same way that a nun would protest and not have sex to be married to God, these women, these feminists, would abstain from sex and protest and not have sex in order to be married to their careers. So they would not have sex with their husbands. They would not have any kind of unity in the marriage, and in order to not get pregnant in the beginning. And then obviously, if pregnancy does happen, that's where you kind of get the whole we should have the right to have children or not have children argument. And then you kind of get to the second wave feminist ideas of Margaret Sanger, who I'm sure everybody that's listening is kind of already familiar with. So these ideas may have started with the initial thought of, oh, let's have equal opportunity. But as a foundational, or at the heart of it, at the root of it, it actually comes from an ideas of independence from men, breaking up the family structure, revolting against God's idea of sexuality. So you see this idea of sexual perversion intertwined with the feminist movement. And that's kind of, it just gets a little bit worse going into the second wave feminism, which of course we know is where the crazies come out to play. So,
and in his poem, Shelley basically portrays God as the author of all evil and Satan the bringer of light, or Satan the bringer of all good. And you're like, like you can't create anything. All you can do is like corrupt what's already been created. And in this poem, there's the heroine, of his poem. Again, this is the husband of Mary Shelley, who goes on to write Frankenstein, which I want to talk to you about that too. And Cintha in the poem is the earthly messenger of Satan who defines gender roles. In the poem, the messenger of Satan. The messenger of Satan defines gender roles. Wow. This is, by the way, this is 1816, the year 1816. Yeah. And she is the voice of the feminist revolution, following Satan as the liberator. And Cynthia in this poem asks the question, can man be free if woman be a slave? Can man be free if woman be a slave? Noleen, guess what I just saw pop up on my computer? Right as I'm getting here to interview you and talk to you, Emma Watson, who plays Hermione, which, by the way, I'm actually a huge Harry Potter nerd. There's so many gospel themes that J.K. Rowling didn't know that she was weaving into the story, which would be an episode for another time. But Emma Watson says that encouraging marriage for women is a form of violence. Because it's oppressive. I mean, what do you say to that?
It's so consistent with feminist ideology. Like, when I tell you, like, I don't know if you've ever looked up the Feminist Declaration of 1971, I think it was. They quite literally talk about marriage being an institution that facilitates slavery for women. And I think it was this group they were called the Feminist. I think they were in the 60s, second wave feminism. They called themselves the Feminists. They were radical feminists in the second wave. And one of them, her name was Sheila Cronin. And she made this statement. She says, marriage constitutes slavery for women. And the Feminist Declaration actually says we should absolve Christianity and we should go back to the ancient religions and spiritual ideas like witchcraft. So what's so funny is, and I almost always will tie in, whenever I can, will tie in feminism to witchcraft, because every time you see witchcraft practiced in terms of gender roles, in terms of worldview, you can see feminism will somewhere pop up. And so I find it very interesting that they have created this mentality that marriage, just like all the other feminists have said, you know, what the Bible has, the system it has set up, patriarchy that has God as the tyrant and Adam is the priest, patriarchal priest of Eden. These ideas kind of came from the same origins. The Bible is wrong. But that would mean, if the Bible is wrong, that would mean all of the institutions that God has set up to reflect his image and glory are also wrong. And this is what I would say to the Christians who don't want to get involved in this conversation about feminism. Well, do you care about marriage? Because the Bible describes it as something that is sacred. It's a sacrament in Christendom. If you believe it's a sacrament, that means you believe that it is sacred. And if it's sacred, that means you as a Christian should be advocating for this sacred thing that God has instituted, which means you should be fighting for it. You should be speaking up against it. And if there is any ideology that seeks to tear it down, distort, and destroy, you should be speaking against that movement, feminism as one example. And so every time I talk about feminism, marriage will come up, because ultimately feminists do believe that marriage is an institution that men created to keep women in chains, which is just practically, if you look at history, is a ridiculous idea. But Emma Watson is a very consistent feminist, so I'll give her that.
Yeah, well, isn't it funny? Like we've reached the full blown upside down. So if marriage is a form of violence against women, well, then I guess abortion is healthcare.
Exactly.
I guess everything is inverted. So the sacraments of Christ become slavery and violent, and then actual violence, the murder of children, the sexual mutilation of minors, that becomes health caring. Yeah.
And I mean, if you want to go, I just wanted to interject because there is a rabbit hole that you could go down that is so interesting. There was a piece of Jewish demonology, or I guess it was formed out of Jewish demonology, but it's called the Alphabet of Ben Sira. Have you heard of it? You probably have read a bit about it. Okay, so the Alphabet of Ben Sira was written by, they can trace it to like as early as like the 8th century, I think, but it kind of came up a lot in the 1600s, the late 1400s, and at its peak in the 1600s, which is the same time as the Salem witch trials and all of that kind of stuff in history. But what's interesting about the Alphabet of Ben Sira, this is also a readaptation of Genesis chapter 3, The idea is that they have read Genesis and the origin of mankind being created, right? Okay, God makes man and woman in his image in equality. But then the second translation of Genesis chapter 2, which we understand if you do basic exegesis, you see that chapter 1 is written in a form of poetry. Chapter 2 is written as a narrative genre. So they're just different ways of writing the same story. But from their perspective, what they looked at was it seems to be that there is some sort of differences in chapter 1 and 2 of the Genesis story, specifically in regards to woman's role. So in first chapter, it says that they're equal. In the second chapter, it seems like there's a little bit of a problem here. What they interpreted was that Adam actually had two wives, the first wife being, her name was called Lilith. And so apparently Adam's first wife, Lilith, they were made with perfect equality, both in the image of God, male and female. He created them. And Lilith wasn't happy with her subjugation in her marriage with Adam. And so she decided to rebel and to step up in a place of equality. And because of this, supposedly, God kicked her out of the garden and she escaped and was trying to escape. The angels were trying to capture her so they could drown her. And Lilith vows from that moment on to live in rebellion against God's order. One of the things that she commits to is that every child that would be born, she would try to make sure that child either does not be born, so she'll bring sickness on the infant or the mother. And so in this time, you would have people that believed in this Jewish demonology story of Lilith, who was a advocate. It was what the feminists would use as like a feminist icon in this time. They would literally put symbols of the angels or like little statues of the angels around cradles so that Lilith wouldn't come in the night. This demon Lilith creature would not come in the night and kill their child. And so I find it so interesting that this feminist idea of Lilith, this woman, this spirit that birthed out of these middle-aged feminist groups, somehow also it has vowed to kill children, in whether or not in the womb or out of the womb when they're fresh newborn. So it's a very interesting story. And then obviously you get into like the Salem witch trials, which what's funny is most historians in that time take a feminist worldview. So they're not going to talk about the secret society of like devil worshipping feminists who believe that Lilith was an idol that they should summon. And they would do like black mass. It's just a distortion of the Catholic mass. Woman's body would be seen as an altar. And so she would strip naked, lie on this altar, and they would perform disgusting acts on her. They would sacrifice children. And so a lot of what people see from a historical point of view reading on a baseline from a surface level is these women weren't actual witches. It was just women wanted equality with men. And so the men in the church were trying to accuse them of witchcraft and kill them because of the equality. That's the narrative that feminists have been spinning for centuries, is that the Salem witch trials, or the witch trials in general, were just a means of patriarchal oppression on women who wanted equality, when the facts actually show that if you go down the rabbit hole, there were secret societies of feminist witches that used Lilith as an example and wanted to disobey God's order and God's holy and perfect design. So that is another rabbit hole that you could go down in your spare time.
Noleen, Pat Buchanan, who ran for president in 1992 when I was 1 year old, said something that was taken as so incendiary at the time that he was nearly crucified for saying it. But based off of everything you just said, guys, I just want you to hear this. This is what he said. He said the feminist movement and agenda is a socialist, anti-family political movement that encourages women to leave their husbands, Lilith, kill their children, practice witchcraft, destroy capitalism, and become lesbians.
Exactly. Hit the nail on the head. I'll get that tattooed on myself.
I mean, you go, whoa. Well, so yeah. Lilith is a feminist icon, and her first action in folklore is that she refuses to submit to her husband, so she ends up killing children. And you're like, and by the way, you and your husband know a lot more about America and the American culture war than most non-Americans. But so you probably know this. But anyways, there's an abortion fund. So it helps women travel to other states and kill their children. It's called the Lilith Fund.
Yeah.
And then there was an abortion center in Portland called the Peace, Joy, Love Center. Peace, Joy, Love was the name of the abortion center. My friend Randy Alcorn was arrested outside of there ages ago for peacefully standing on a public sidewalk, and then they ended up suing him, and a pro-abortion judge gave him a bad decision so that Planned Parenthood could garnish his wages if he made over minimum wage, and so he decided to never make over minimum wage. But that abortion center changed their name a few years ago to the Lilith Center. So you've got like a couple different baby killing organizations that say, hey, America, we just want you to know, like, we identify with like the first feminist demon who in their defiance is now known for killing infants. That we want to identify with that label, and you just go, wow, thanks for telling us who you are, I guess.
And it's crazy too, because I went down the rabbit hole with this and checked. I was like, because there's not that many historical documents in reference to Lilith besides the alphabet of Ben Sira and like kind of just like chatter among Jewish demonology, but what is interesting, I'm like, I wonder if this word is in the Bible, and it is actually once in the Hebrew in the book of Isaiah. I can't remember the chapter, forgive me, but it basically speaks of, and I was kind of tracking with the, I was looking at the origins of this word Lilith in the Hebrew. It's in the book of Isaiah as like a screeching demon of the night. And it kind of talks about it like it's in the wilderness, and it warns the desolations and the wilderness, kind of exemplifying rebellion and chaos of God's people. But what is interesting is that the origins of this idea of the Babylonian Lilith comes from the time of Babylon, where it is believed there's a lot of like Babylonian texts that show that she was one of the goddesses that would be worshipped. And one of the ways, shocking enough, one of the ways that they would use to worship her is child sacrifice. So, I mean, there is a lot of historical, but also biblical evidence to this creature or demon of Lilith. And I truly believe that the whole feminist ideology is demonic. I believe it's demonically inspired. I believe that there is a spiritual reality to this. You can pull apart the theological problems, the ideological problems, historical, but ultimately this is just a spiritual attack like anything else that tries to tear down what scripture says as perfect.
There's so much more to say, but first we want to thank our sponsor of the Seth Gruber Show, Every Life Diaper Company. Listen, I'm just going to keep saying this because I think that if millions of Christians, who, by the way, are outbreeding the left and having all of the babies, we're the only ones above replacement rate, I think. Well, except the Muslims, but that's a conversation for another time. If we just all stopped purchasing child baby needs from left-wing woke pro-abortion companies, we could start bankrupting woke corporatism, and that would be a great win for the American family. If you are having babies, if your loved ones are having babies, if you're a grandma or grandpa and you want to give something to your kids or grandkids, the nursery at your church, for goodness sake, should not be buying from Coterie or Huggies, who all support abortion. That's right. Did you know every major American diaper company supports abortion in some way, shape, or form? What? How could the people who profit when more babies are born help subsidize and financially or rhetorically support the killing of their clientele base? I don't know. Make it make sense. You have to fight back with your wallet. We as American Christians need to actually treat our money as a way to fight for righteousness. Get your diapers, baby wipes, and now shampoos and body washes, non-toxic, baby, from Every Life Diaper Company. Go to everylife.com, use promo code Seth10, that's Seth10, Seth10, to get 10% off your first order. That lets them know that we sent you, and so they can see, hey, the Seth Gruber Show listeners, they're actually making a difference for life and growing their business. Yes, we want to help grow businesses that support babies and not killing them. Go to everylife.com, promo code Seth10. Thank you, Every Life, for being a sponsor of the Seth Gruber Show. Where does it go from feminism that just focuses on, like, hey, women need to vote, women need to be able to go to school, women need to be able to own property? Some of the backlash from the feminists at that era was like actually in response to like men's immorality and their drunkenness, which is an interesting thing. We had that conversation with Dr. Nancy Piercy on the show recently. But at what point does it move from that to like, smash the patriarchy, we hate men, we need to kill our children? And does that eventually connect to trans? Like,
yeah.
And how would you argue that?
Yeah. I mean, I think you can credit that to the second wave feminist crazies. If you look into Marxist ideology, you can look into the Frankfurt School, you can look into critical theory. All these ideologies, these Marxist ideologies being infiltrated into the university system, I think is what truly skyrocketed these ideologies. So like the gender sex theory, the critical sex theory, critical gender theory, all of these ideas, like if you look into the 60s where you see all of a sudden women are out protesting on the street, personally, I credit a lot of this to media. You can see the TV, like the rise of television being in people's homes. I can't even remember the dates for this, but at one point in time, I think it was like towards the end of the 50s, not that many women, I think it was like 1 in 10 households had a TV. And then go 10 years later, and then almost 80% of people had a TV in their household. And so while women were at home doing the cooking and cleaning, taking care of the children, and the men were out of the house, women were sitting in front of TVs all day while they were doing their household duties, just being bombarded with all of this propaganda.
Being told they're oppressed. Yeah.
Being told they're oppressed, being told like all of these drugs to their so-called depression that just make it all worse. It's the same stuff that you can see now. And when I look at how this evolved into the transgender argument, it's just funny that you're bringing up like Emma Watson, who is a so-called feminist standing up for women's rights, but then they also can't define what a woman is because she's a huge advocate of the trans ideology as well, the trans delusion as well. So
which led her to attack J.K. Rowling, the woman that she owes her career to.
Oh, exactly. And
a few years ago.
That. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
Talk about that. So here's feminist Emma Watson, who destroys her relationship with the author of Harry Potter, because the author of Harry Potter, who, by the way, probably thinks of herself as a feminist. She probably thinks that, like, first wave is great. But J.K. Rowling's put her whole platform career on the line to stand up for women against the trans movement.
Yeah, yeah.
What is going on there, Noleen?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is kind of when you think about ideologically, the whole idea of feminism, especially in the second wave feminism, and I mean, you can find it in first wave, but second wave feminism was equality with men, right? So if a woman can be a man, if she can do what a man can do, she can act the way that a man can act and get the outcomes of what man gets. If women can become men, then why can't trans women be women? Ideologically, it's the same delusion. I am not stupid enough to say that I can do whatever my husband can do. I cannot do what my husband can do. There's no way. What this man does is crazy. And biologically, that's how he's made up to be. Like, if you think of Aquinas' natural law theory, the idea that God's eternal morality is found in the law of nature, biologically men are stronger. Biologically, their testosterone spikes when the sun goes up and it goes down when the sun goes down. It's like a 24-hour cycle. Men were made to work. Women's cycle is 28 days. It doesn't work in the same way that a man's does. So women's bodies are working around the idea of making children and caring for children based on our hormonal cycle, whereas a man's hormonal cycle is based around working and physical labor. So that's just like the obvious. But these ideas that a woman can become a man pave the way for transgender ideology, the transgender delusion that a man can become a woman. Like, I look at the feminists that argue, you know, J.K. Rowling, this is what I would challenge her with. Don't think I would ever have a conversation with her, but I would challenge her. I would say, can't you see, like, you're a big advocate against transgenderism, which I respect and I support you wholeheartedly, but can't you see where it's a little bit nuanced? I hate that word, but it's true. Can't you see where it kind of gets a little bit blurry when you look at feminism, and feminism kind of advocated for the same thing, that a woman can act like a man and have the same capabilities of a man. It's just not true. And so we're happy to acknowledge that one part of biology when it comes to rejecting transgenderism, but we're not happy to look at the biological aspect when it looks at feminism as an ideology in terms of equality of outcome.
So just so everyone knows that, like, this is not just Nolene's opinion, this is what you can observe. Percy Shelley called sex differences detestable distinctions. Mm-hmm. That's what he called sex differences. Yeah. Detestable distinctions. And he said that these would, quote, surely be abolished in the future state of being, end quote. I mean, that's the son-in-law of the first feminist who pushes this stuff forward. And they're saying the goal is the abolition of biological and sexual differences. If you don't see the roots of transgenderism in the origins of feminism, I don't know what else to tell you. Maybe Shula Smith Firestone will convince you, who wrote The Dialectic of Sex in 1970. And she said, she literally said, so the end goal of feminist revolution must be, unlike that of the first feminist movement, not just the elimination of male privilege, but of the sex distinction itself. Genital differences between human beings would no longer matter culturally. And her final line is, the tyranny of the biological family will be broken.
Yeah, there it is. I mean, it is so funny to me because it's like, and I know you've done some stuff on Gnosticism. And when I studied this, I'm like, oh my gosh, you can see I know Nancy Pearcey's even written an incredible book on this. I've read it twice. It's incredible. But the ideas of the Gnostic idea, like the split of the soul and the body, and if what I feel on the inside is different to what's on the outside, like it's the same thing with feminism, with transgenderism, with homosexuality, with abortion. All of these ideas come from just bad theology and bad hermeneutic. How do we interpret this and actually live it out and apply it to our culture? And so I look at little things, like I love Gen Z. I love young people. I always have. Like, I've always had a heart for it. I mean, I'm in pastoral ministry, so I think I see the power in the young people. Every revolution, every revival has been sparked by young people. But what I find so interesting, and I don't know if you think, I'm sure that you're a deep man, so I feel like you'd get me on this, but people think that I'm crazy. If you look at the style of Gen Z, I don't know about you, but sometimes I can't tell what is female and what is male. Like, Harry Styles is just one example. He looks like an absolute soy boy wearing ballerina outfits on his concerts. Like, that's the extreme. But I'm talking like even men wearing like these crop top, like, I don't even know what it is. Like the way they dress, men painting their nails, and you have worship leaders now these days with painted nails singing Christian songs in the top charts. What is that? And people will say, when you go for and you say, hey, you're a man, you shouldn't do this, what they'll tell you, oh, this is just a social construct. I'm like, you are using the same way of thinking, the same argument as the socialists and the Satanists, like Percy Shelley being one example. So these ideas, it's just the further away you go from the biblical boundaries of what it is to be a man, what it is to be a woman, in both feminism and transgenderism, the line is so blurry these days that even the way that you dress, you can't even differentiate. So I personally have the conviction, and people think this is extreme, when I dress, I'm making sure that I look feminine enough. Like, I know it's obvious that I'm a woman, but in everything that I do, in the way that I speak, in the way that I submit to my husband, in the way I serve, in the way that I speak, everything, but also in the way that I dress, I am intentionally making sure that I'm reflecting God's idea of what it is to be a woman, to be feminine, to be soft, to be, the ways that the Bible has described it. To be hardworking, by the way, is one of the attributes of the Proverbs 31 woman. And so the idea that feminists say that it was feminism that came up with the idea that women should work is just stupid, because the Proverbs 31 woman was a hard worker with strong arms to do work around the household. And so all these ideas are just like like, just dumb. You just have to look in the Bible and you'll find all the answers that you need. But I just find it so interesting that all of the ideologies and like the quote you just said, it all comes back to the same thing. And you can find it in everything that tries to contradict scripture. Socialism, anarchism, all the isms, atheism, feminism, all the isms that seek to tear down what God has said. So it is a very interesting similarity.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you're talking about androgyny. There's an androgynous aspect of this generation and of this culture, which is, that has a lot of connection to the spiritual as well. Oh, because even by the way, the Satanic Temple in America, they're like either founder or president of the Satanic Temple. I just forgot his name. He poses with pentagrams and he poses with this Baphomet statue. Well, Baphomet is like this androgynous demon that has both male and female attributes.
Yeah.
And there's a famous tattoo on most statues and drawings of Baphomet. Again, just listen, make sure you don't miss what I just said, guys. The Satanic Temple has statues to honor Baphomet. So that these are the figures that they worship and care about. And on the arm of this androgynous demon in Latin, it says Solve et Coagula. And Solve et Coagula means to break down or disintegrate down to its base so that you can rebuild.
Wow.
Like the Romantics understood, the way to change civilization was to go back to the beginning and rewrite its origins.
Yeah.
It's like all this just starts to make a lot of sense when you're a Christian, guys. And okay, so anyways, what would you tell Emma Watson? Because obviously you must be an absolute slave. I mean, you must be living in a violent relationship because you're married, right, Noleen?
Oh yeah, no, save me. You know what's funny? You'll find this so funny. I get a lot of comments on like any kind of reel that I post or anything that's just outrageous to the progressive mind, which is quite a lot of my content. I'll always get like one or two comments saying like, wear yellow in your next video if your husband is forcing you to say what you're saying, or like blink twice in your next, like, it's so funny. And what my argument is, I'm like, it's very feminist of you. Supposedly feminists say that they're advocating women and women having their own mind and their own autonomous worldview that's not influenced by man. But if a woman believes the opposite of what the cultural norm believes, then apparently I'm being brainwashed. Like, it's a ridiculous. And what's funny is, going back to the witch trials, what's funny is the most of the people that, what's the word, would tell on other women for being witches and would turn them in as witches, would snitch, would be other women. And so I looked into it, like, what do historians have to say about this if apparently it was some sort of subjugation of women? They said, oh, the women that snitched on other women were being brainwashed by their husbands. I'm like, it's so convenient of you to assume that if I have a different ideology to you, then I must be brainwashed by my husband. But I mean, what I would say to Emma Watson, I would say, I'm sure she's already seen, and I think every single person knows deep down, every feminist knows deep down, that this is an empty way to live. I think that anybody in Hollywood, anybody that doesn't follow the Christian ideals, the Christian way of life, Christianity in general, or anybody that doesn't live in the structure God has set, eventually you will get depressed. Eventually you will come to a point where you will figure out this is not how I should be living. Like, what is so interesting is, like, what's that theory that if you put a bird in a cage long enough, eventually when you open the cage, it won't fly. It's like, there are like, studies that have been done of putting animals in cages, and these animals get depressed because they were not made to live in a cage. They were made to live in the wild. And so how is it that we do studies on animals and we can understand the common sense that the way that you were designed to live is going to bring you fulfillment, but when it comes to humanity and human nature and anthropology, for some reason that one's different. For some reason humans can step out of the boundaries of nature and still flourish and thrive thrive and be happy. It just doesn't work. And so I think a lot of these women get to a point in their life where they figure out something is wrong, but they cannot conclude. They never come to a point where they conclude it's these ideologies they've been living by. They'll just come up with some sort of surface level thing like, you know, I don't have enough status, I don't have enough money, or I need eventually they'll actually end up getting married, which I find hilarious. Like Taylor Swift, who just got engaged. Like it's eventually they come to the conclusion, I am not fulfilled in my life. It doesn't matter how much money and fame, and it doesn't matter how much I make it in my career. Eventually I'm going to come to a dead end and I'm going to feel empty inside. And eventually they end up either settling down and having, you know, getting married, or they end up exploring some sort of spiritual ideology, which is interesting.
Well, we should probably land the plane, Noleen, but I keep thinking of more things. Also, what about this? How many of the feminist revolutionaries and leaders, how many of them had really great relationships with their father?
Oh, none.
Right? Isn't that interesting?
Like, honestly, you can trace most of these issues to just daddy issues. It's just very simple. Mm-hmm.
Well, so then let's let this be the last thing we talk about then. I guess what I'm saying is patriarchy is inevitable. Mm-hmm. I guess is actually what I'm saying. Like, oh yeah, either it will reign through its destruction in the lives of its daughters.
Yes.
Or it will reign in protection and beauty, in its the protection of its daughters.
Absolutely.
And so then Mary Shelley ends up writing Frankenstein at 18 years old. And this hideous creature creation of Dr. Frankenstein just wants to be loved, but is rejected by everyone except by a blind dude. In revenge, the creature kills everyone Frankenstein loved, and Frankenstein himself, and then it kills himself. It's almost like a seemingly biographical novel. Yeah. What do you think of that?
It is interesting, like the Frankenstein ideal of like creation turning on the creator. And I mean, I think it is very interesting, Mary Shelley, knowing both sides of this, understanding the Christian worldview and then understanding this worldview in opposition. Eventually, that's what it is. Like, I can't remember who said it, but somebody said like socialism is wanting the kingdom of God without the king. It's reaching this idea of dystopia or utopia. It's an idea of utopia without God. And so it's trying to get to heaven without God himself. And so you'll try to mimic that in every way that you can without including God in the picture. And so it's just so like going back again, this is just a pattern, it comes full circle, is that you can't build anything. So you take an idea of what God has established, distort it, turn it on its head and try to fabricate a false reality. It just comes back to the same thing. Do things God's way. Like the way that you were created, the creator, instead of turning on the creator, how about you surrender to the creator, this good and perfect and holy creator, and live in the way that he designed. That is not just what makes God happy. It doesn't just bring God happiness. It makes you happy. So people fail to understand it's your submission to the creative order that God has set is actually in your benefit. You don't have to have this Frankensteinian alter ego that is just angry at the world and is destroying everything because you refuse to submit. How about you take an alternative approach? Try for 1 year to submit to God's order. And I guarantee you, try it for 1 year, live the way that God has set. You'll figure out you are more fulfilled, you are happier, and you have more flourishing in every area of your life. And then almost always people just dedicate their entire life to living like that. So I think the Bible is perfect. It speaks for itself, and the evidence throughout history speaks for itself as well. The Bible is perfect, and this is what heaven is going to be. What is on earth, what God has established in Eden, is just a reflection of what heaven is. It's just one different representation of God's perfect design. And so the way I see it is all Christians should be involved in this conversation. All Christians should be researching this stuff because it is the battle that the next generation are currently facing, and it's what is deterring them from following God wholeheartedly. So
Yeah. What did Chesterton say, Noleen? Feminism is a muddled idea, that women are free when they serve their employers, but slaves when they help their husbands.
yeah, it's gold. It's gold. It's genius.
Why is it wrong and evil and oppressive for women to submit to their husbands? But it's not evil, mean, and oppressive when Jesus submits to the Father.
Exactly. Yeah. So the images that woman has been given to reflect the image of God, the examples are helper. The Holy Spirit himself is called the helper. So I get to reflect the Holy Spirit himself in that role. The idea of submission is, like you said, reflected by the Son. He submits to the Father. So I get to reflect the sacred image of Jesus Christ himself as I submit to my husband. I say this all the time, and women get so mad when I say it. I'm like, you actually are transformed into the image of Christ the more you learn to submit to your godly husband. And they get so mad. I'm like, well, no, because Christ submitted to the Father, which means the more you submit in the way the Bible describes submission under a godly husband, under his leadership, you actually are reflecting the image of Christ. So all these ideas is just so sneaky of the enemy to take them and to make them seem oppressive when God himself has shown the reflection of what that looks like.
Whew. Well, that'll preach. There you go, guys. Noleen Sedra, feminism is a cancer and it's demonic. Anyways, well, don't tattoo that quote on your body, by the way, Noleen.
I won't. My husband will love anyway.
Oh, so you would obey him. Look, there's the end of it.
Of
there you go. Thanks, Noleen. We'll continue this conversation, I'm sure. And where can people follow you and check out Echo Church?
Yeah, you can find us on all socials, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. We put all of our sermon content up there, Echo Church Sydney, or on socials, you can find me at Noleen Sedra or Echo Church on Instagram as well.
Thanks, Noleen.
Thank you so much, Seth.
Thanks, guys. There you go. That's a spicy one. I told you. I tried to warn you. You should be thanking her, huh? That was fire. Go send that, share that to your soy boy pastor of the church you should have left a year ago, and send that to your woke feminist sister, and pay your crazy feminist mom, that Woodstock boomer that needs to meet Jesus. Pay her to watch it and take your mom out to coffee. Why don't you talk about this? This is so much the root of the problem in the family. And feminism has snuck into the church. So please share this episode widely. Noleen is a wealth of information. Do that for me. Send that to someone. Have a conversation. Until next week, I'm Seth Gruber, and this is The Seth Gruber Show.